Hey everyone, Jared here from Storytowns, and this is our podcast series during this lockdown. We are going around and talking to wineries, or we did go around and talk to wineries. We can't at the moment, but luckily we spoke to everyone before this whole lockdown kicked in. This is John from Hochkirch Wineries, and John is super intelligent and I really enjoyed talking to him. I've just drove into Hochkirch Winery. John, you own this winery. Hochkirch, tell me about the name.
Hochkirch is the original name of the village of Tarrington, which is 5 k's up the road. So that was, as I mentioned, this area was settled by Germans or people of German descent in the mid-19th century. And they named the village Hochkirch, which is not the German pronunciation, but it's a sort of an anglicised pronunciation, because they came from a village of the same name in what is now Saxony in southeast Germany.
Wow. And what year did they change it to Tarrington, do you know?
Yes, I do know. A bit controversial. 1918, at the end of the First World War, there's a lot of anti-German sentiment in the country, and a lot of German place names were changed to English names at that time.
Okay.
A lot, particularly in South Australia, and also in Victoria. Of course, there were less German names in Victoria. Almost all of them were changed back to the original German, but a couple weren't, and Tarrington or Hochkirch is one of those.
Well, thanks for bringing Hochkirch, the name back. That's great.
Yes, we enjoy it.
Now tell me, so you've been here, your family's been on this farm for five generations? Four.
My great-grandfather settled here in the sort of about 1870 or so. He wasn't actually on this property, he was just over there a kilometre or so.
Okay.
And then my grandfather built a house here and farmed. My father did the same, and I'm coming up along behind him.
Are you the first one to start producing wine?
Yes.
Okay. And before that, they were farm beef and cattle.
Originally subsistence farming.
What do you mean by subsistence?
The settlers from what is now Germany that came here were peasant farmers, and they had small holdings. They grew food for themselves, orchard, vegetables, maybe a bit of grain, bit of milk from a cow or two. They might have had a little bit of surplus which they might have sold or traded with, but generally they grew what they needed. And that was the way that group of people farmed up until towards the end of the 19th century, when the wool industry developed. Wool offered a cash crop, and gradually that subsistence style of farming was replaced by what we now recognise as farming, which is growing a crop that you can sell for money that you can then buy your food with, rather than grow it yourself. Part of that subsistence farming did involve vines, and there were quite a few vineyards in the area up until the late 19th century.
How did you fall into this? What was it, a passion that you had, or was it something you just decided to start growing grapes one day and then see what happens? Or how did this start? Fermentation has always been a big part of German food, and so we grew up with various fermented foods. My father did a bit of small-scale winemaking, and I did a little bit when I was a child, and gradually became more interested. And then before setting up the vineyard, I knew I wanted to come back on the farm and work it and make something of it, hopefully for my kids to benefit from. But I was after some industry that would allow us to brand the product, to have sort of control over whatever it was we were selling, rather than just being trying to sell a commodity. And what year did you start making wine then?
We started planting vines in 1990. We made a bit of wine, I suppose, from about 94. First sort of commercial vintage was 97. We moved towards organics then around that time. Did that for about 3 years, and then we started using the biodynamic method of farming, which we've done since 99.
What do you mean by biodynamic? How do you define that a little bit?
Biodynamic is the least well understood method of agriculture in the world. It's a specialised form of organic farming which is preoccupied with soil health. So everything that we do in biodynamics is designed to produce a healthy structured soil, which then doesn't require external inputs like synthetic fertilisers.
like all organic forms of farming, it avoids any chemical products. It's not a system of farming that you can explain in a couple of sentences, and I don't think this podcast is long enough for me to get into it.
Fair enough.
But it is a very rewarding way to farm and produces food and fibre of the highest quality with minimal inputs.
And well, then tell me about the wines that you're growing here. What are you producing here?
So our climate here is cool in any terms. We have fairly reliable rainfall and well-drained gravelly loam soils. Quite a bit of clay at depth, so good water holding capacity in the soils. We specialise in cool climate varieties, Pinot Noir, Chardonnay, Riesling, Syrah or Shiraz. We grow vines unirrigated, which is not very widely practiced in this country anymore.
And why is that? Why aren't you taking on that method?
Irrigation will increase yields, but inevitably reduces quality because it changes the way the vine grows. It encourages the vine to have active surface roots rather than active deep roots. And that means the vine doesn't exploit the volume of soil that it needs to produce the best quality product.
Oh, so you're taking a real scientific method approach here, if that's the best way to put it.
Yeah, we certainly take a logical, informed scientific approach. Yeah.
So is your background in I can talk into you, quite well-educated, intelligent person. Where's your background?
I went to university, studied medicine, and ended up a radiologist.
Okay, all right. It's all coming together now.
So yeah, I do have a good sort of sound scientific background, and my approach to biodynamics is very much based on logic and science.
Where can we find your wine? So you guys are cellar doors sometimes by appointment, is that right?
Yeah, we're open by appointment simply because we don't see a lot of custom. So up here, so that's the easiest way to run it. Wines mainly are sold in the capital cities, and about 2/3 in restaurants, 1/3 in off-premise. Locally, we service a lot of restaurants, Royal Mail, Merry Jig in Port Fairy.
And we're looking for what label are we looking for?
We actually have two labels because we have two vineyards. The main vineyard here on this property is the Hochkirch label. Yep. And then 3 k's up the road, we have a second vineyard, which is called, funnily enough, Tarrington.
Nice.
So we cover both bases.
Well, thanks for talking to me today, John. I really appreciate it.
That's my pleasure.
Thank you, John. I am Jared from Storytowns. You can join us on Instagram and Facebook. You can get updates when we have new podcasts or podcast tours, and I'll talk to you on the next podcast. Thanks, everyone.